Okay, what you saying, people? Welcome back to my channel, and today we have the weekly Forex analysis. Now, if you're new to my channel, make sure you hit the subscribe button, leave a like, because I'll be dropping a lot of Forex content in the future. I'll be doing this weekly analysis every week, so you don't want to miss out on that. But today we have the weekly Forex analysis, and on your screen are the 10 pairs we'll be analysing today. So let me stop chatting and let's get into it. Okay, so the first pair we're analysing is Euro USD. Okay, so for Euro USD, this market is looking bullish now. We had the break of the weekly trend line that I've been talking about, a touch here, a second touch here, and then prices had multiple touches, failing to break it, and this week we finally had the break of that same trend line. So we're looking at possibly a continuation of that original push to the upside on the daily chart. So you could be waiting for slight corrections on the daily time frame and the 4-hour time frame, then you can enter for a continuation to the upside. But as you can see that we had the push, then prices pull back from that bowl shape, might get a slight dip in the market, and then price carry on. And on the weekly time frame, you can see that we had that break of that trend line, so it looks like we'll be pushing up to the monthly trend line. And on the monthly, you can see, let me zoom out, see the same wedge pattern that I've been talking about, and we had the recent test of the lower trend line, so it looks like we'll be going to go test that upper one, and possibly then price will come and fall back down, or unless it breaks it. So that's where we think price is going to be heading, to that monthly trend line. And on the daily chart, you can see that we've had that push, so all we'll be waiting for is some strong corrections, and then for price to continue to the upside. Next up, we have USD JPY. Okay, so for USD JPY, you can see that we have this ascending channel on the daily chart, and we're expecting price to respect and keep moving to that upside. But price is having a hard time push away from that lower trend line. You can see that we've had multiple tests recently of that same trend line, and price is failing to push away from it. So if we do have a break of that trend line, we could be looking for corrections and retest to carry it on USD JPY to the downside, or we could be looking at these levels and possibly all the way to the low down there. But if we do have a break to the upside, we can look for corrections and carry that to the upside. But USD JPY is currently just moving sideways, so we need a break either to the upside or to the downside, but either way is likely. But on the weekly chart, we can see that we've got this downtrend in the market, and price is giving us those lower highs, and price is struggling to break through this low here for some time. So we could be seeing a move back to this level before we get that move to create that level high again and then back down. So we have to be aware of that situation. So we could be seeing the weekly time frame taking control and having that break to the downside on the daily chart. And if that's the case, again, just look for the break, because it is moving sideways, and look for the break, wait for some corrections, some retest, and then carry on to the downside. So now let's take a look at USD CAD. Okay, so now on to USD CAD on the daily chart, and price is still moving sideways for USD CAD. Price is struggling to break through this level here and this level here, and you see that also has the 200 moving average as well, helping it out, keeping it in that range. So again, we need a clear break of this. Before we had a break there, that turns out to be a false breakout. It's come back in and it's still ranging. So again, we're waiting for that break to the upside or to the downside, and we are expecting a break to the upside because of the higher time frame. You can see that we have this ascending channel on the weekly time frame, and we had a recent test of that same trend line recently. So we can see we had that reaction, showed that price is respecting it, it's moving sideways now, so we're expecting a break for price to continue back to the upside. But if price does break to the downside, we could be seeing maybe a retest of that same trend line, or a double bottom there before it rises to the upside. But again, there is possibility that we could have USD CAD just completely fall and not respect either the trend line or this level. And if that's the case, we could be seeing a bigger trend in the market, and for price to come all the way down to this sort of area in the market, because we have that break of that structure, then price should be forming a new downwards trend. But again, we're going to say due to the trend on the higher time frame, which is to the upside. So that's why we're expecting USD CAD to keep moving to that upside. So again, back to the daily chart, wait for the break of this range pattern, and then look for some corrections, some retest, and carry it on to the side it breaks out. Up next is Euro GBP. Okay, so for Euro GBP, I'm going to start on the daily chart. And last week we had the break of that daily trend line, which changed our bias in the market to bearish. And last week we had the break, and I was saying that we could have a potential rise, a pullback in the market before it continues to have its down move. You can see that we've had that push up, we had that doji, and price looks like it's come back to test this level in the market here, and giving us a wick on that daily trend line as well. So it looks like it's come back to retest that trend line. So you could be looking for selling opportunities on Euro GBP to carry on that downwards trend to the downside. On the weekly chart, you can see this level is quite strong. This is the level right here. You can see that I had those two wicks, prices come up past that level, come right back down, so false breakout, again come up, right back down. And then 2 weeks ago we had this wick, price tried to break through the level, couldn't, gave us a wick, came back down, closed below it. And again, let me remove that daily trend line. You can see again we had that break of the level, gave us a wick, closed back below that level, so that's quite significant. So we could be looking for selling opportunities to carry on a downwards trend to the downside, to possibly hit this weekly level, or eventually to come all the way to the low down here. So that's what could be happening for the daily chart for Euro GBP. We could be looking for the start of a new downtrend in the market. But again, if this carries on going up and breaking through that daily trend line and breaks through this daily resistance in the market here, then we could be seeing a longer move to the upside. But my bias is more to the downside with Euro GBP. Okay, so now on to NZD CAD. Okay, so now we're over to NZD CAD on the daily time frame, and you can see that we've finally hit that weekly trend line. We've had a slight reaction off it, so we could be looking at potentially a continuation of that downwards trend on that weekly chart. So if I go to the weekly, you can see that we've had this weekly trend line giving us lower highs, and we could be looking at that next lower high on that weekly time frame and continue back to the downside. If I go back to the daily chart, you can see that, and let me zoom in, see that we had that reaction, but price has failed to have that strong push from the higher time frame. It's had a slight push and looks like it's failing to break further to the downside. So we could be having a retest, so essentially maybe a double top before we get that move to the downside, or price could be looking to range a little bit, and that's when we could be having a break to the upside potentially, or a break to the downside. So we just have to see how price develops next week. There's no clear strong move to the downside yet, so the overall trend is still up. So we need to see that big push before we know that the weekly trend line is held, and we could be looking for a new downtrend, potentially to be hitting these lows here, or be creating that new low with that downtrend. So next week should be seeing how price develops, see if we get another test of the top of that to get a double top, and then maybe look for selling opportunities there, or again, if it's ranging, wait for a breakout. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at AUD USD. Okay, so over to AUD USD, you see that we're still in that uptrend on that daily chart, but it has broken this trend line. In fact, not with any strength. It looks like it's just, in fact, just moving sideways. So if I remove that trend line, you can see that price is just moving sideways between this level here and this level here. There is a slight uptrend in that range, so possibly we can see a break and then a break of this low, and then we could be looking at a further downtrend. But there's a lot of development needed in AUD-USD to signify what would happen. If there's a break of this upper level, then we could be looking at possibly out of a new uptrend on a higher time frame for AUD-USD, because on the weekly you can see that we've had this downtrend, and this level here was the last swing high of that downtrend. We had the push come up, form that swing high, and obviously the push back down. So if we have a break of that level here, that's quite significant. So we could be looking at a new uptrend, sorry, to continue on to the upside. But price is struggling to break it. It doesn't have much volume moving up to that level there. So we could be looking at an impulsive break from AUD USD to the downside, and then you can be looking for corrections and continue that move onto the downside. But all we have to wait is for a bit more development for AUD USD, because it's still moving that sideways action between these two levels. So again, wait for the break to the upside or to the downside, and then hop on the market there. Up next, we're going to see what's happening with GBP NZD. Okay, so for GBP NZD, you can see that we've still got this downwards trend on the daily time frame. Price is still moving that strong downwards trend. It is coming close to that weekly trend line over here, so we could be seeing a reaction possibly back up to the upside. We go on the weekly chart, you can see why. We've got this ascending channel, and price has a recent test there, and it looks like it's coming back to retest that same trend line. And also we have the 200 moving average on the weekly chart moving right next to that trend line. So there's some confluence there. So we could be seeing a rise in GBP NZD around that area. So back to the daily chart, you see that we had that slight push, but we were having those wicks that I said last week. We're having those wicks, so we could be seeing price just fall back down. So we could be looking at possibly a double bottom, or again a test of that weekly trend line. But on the weekly chart, we can see that we have actually, let me go to the monthly. You can see that we have this overall downwards trend on GBP NZD. That was a really bad line. We have this overall downwards trend on GBP NZD, and we had a test here and now another test here. So we could have a possibility of that longer move all the way down to this low before we look at a larger rise in GBP NZD. If that is the case, we'll have a break of this trend line. You can look for entries on various levels or retest of the trend line, then continuation back down. But I am expecting us to have, if that is the case, I'm expecting us to have at least a reaction at this trend line or at this level to give us a slight push before, of course, that overall downwards trend happens. But we could have a longer push to the upside, because again, this is an ascending channel, which means that we have an uptrend in the market. So you could be seeing a longer push to hit that monthly trend line. But again, on the daily chart, there's not much signals there that the market's reversing. So again, probably just wait for price to come back and test that low or test that trend line to look for buying opportunities. Okay, so let's move on to CAD JPY now. Okay, so now onto CAD JPY. On the daily time frame, you can see that we're still moving sideways between these two levels. So we need a breakout to the upside or the downside for us to get into a trade. On the high time frame, we can see that we have the downtrend in the market. Price is giving us those lower highs, so you could be looking at another one of those lower highs and then get another move back down. But we actually are at a significant point in the market on the higher time frame. So on the monthly, you can see that we've had this lower trend line with 1, 2, 3, 4, and recently a fifth. So you can see price is respecting this trend line very well. So we could be looking at potentially a longer move, because now it's hit that trend line. Could be potentially looking at a longer move to go test that outer monthly trend line. So back to the daily chart, you can see that all we're waiting for is for a break of this range. So we could be preferably looking at a break to the upside and go test this weekly trend line. But there is a case that we could get moved to go retest this monthly and then look back for that new move back to the upside. Okay, so let's move on to GBP USD now. Okay, so for GBP USD, we've got a slight uptrend on the daily chart. You can see that we've got these two highs connecting and these two lows connecting, giving us those two trend lines, creating that channel. So we could be looking at a new push to the upside, but price is failing to break this daily resistance here. You can see that we've had one touch there of that, second touch there. We've had a breakout and then close back in, so it's essentially a false breakout. And again, price has hit that daily resistance and is failing to break below it. So if this resistance holds, then we could be looking at another move to hit this trend line and then possibly a reaction back to the upside. But again, because the overall trend in the market for GBP USD is to the downside. You can see it on the weekly time frame quite well. We got this high here, the next lower high, so we could be looking at another one there, or the overall trend could continue now, and this should be a slight pullback, and then we could be looking at another move to the downside. And if that's the case, we could be looking for price to reach this level, or to go and reach all the way to this low over here. So we have to bear in mind that the overall trend is to the downside on GBP USD. So price should well be holding at this level and give us that move back to the downside. But if it doesn't, we could be looking at a move to go test that weekly trend line. And last but not least, GBP CAD. Okay, so finally GBP CAD. So GBP CAD were in an uptrend, but price seems to be ranging now. So if I move this trend away and I zoom in, you can see that price looks to be stuck between these levels here. Price looked like it was in a downtrend a couple of weeks ago, but we had a couple of false breaks, and that's a double bottom, and move back up to this level, and now price looks like it's ranging between these two levels. So waiting for a clear break to the upside and carry it on, or again a clear break to the downside and carry on that downwards trend. But on the larger time frame, you can see that we've got this upwards trend line, so we could be looking for a move there before we break to the downside because of the larger time frame. As you can see that we've got this trend line here on the weekly time frame, and price been respecting it very well. So if we do get a move to the upside, we'll be looking for price to reverse and go back to the downside. And on the monthly time frame, you can see that we've got this trend line here, which price could be going back to hit before we get the overall break to the upside. So again, all we're just waiting for is to see what price will do with this consolidation in this range. And if we do get the break to the upside, then we could be looking for a longer move to hit these tops or this trend line up there. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the video, and I hope you all enjoyed it. And if you did, make sure you hit the like button, and if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss any uploads. Please leave a comment if you found this useful or if you have any questions. But till the next one, I'll see you later.